Welcome back to A Slice of News, where I cut you off a slice of news. President Trump made good on his claim that he loves the uneducated by announcing that he will be dismantling a large part of the Department of Education. This announcement comes as a sort of follow-up to an executive order he signed back in March that sought to close the Department of Education entirely and had asked Education Secretary Linda McMahon to work with Congress to get that going. Since Congress is the only one that could actually dissolve a department, it was up to them to act on the administration's desire to get rid of it. But up till now, Congress hadn't really done anything or even seeming to consider it at all. Seemingly unwilling to wait for Congress to do what they want and take out the Education Department completely, the administration has decided to move multiple parts of the agency to other federal departments in an effort seemingly to hollow it out if they can't cut it off entirely. Just how many parts of the department are set to be moved out are still unclear. Some are saying as few as 2 and others as many as 6. But reportedly they're eyeing the Office of Civil Rights, the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, and the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, as well as the Office of Post-Secondary Education. The Office of Civil Rights, as the name suggests, is the office within the Department of Education that investigates allegations of discrimination on the basis of race, sex, and disability. The Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services being the office which deals with the Individuals with Disabilities Act programs, and the Elementary and Secondary Education Office, of course, being the office that, among other things, administers the grants for grades K through 12. So all told, these are offices that deal with our nation's most vulnerable populations and the ones that need the most to have people within the government advocating and working for them. Congress set up the Department of Education back in 1979 to ensure that educational opportunities were available to everyone equally, but the administration is making every effort to undermine that, possibly because they view the notion of equality at all as a woke liberal idea, because federal law dictates that these programs must remain within the Department of Education. The administration has been stymied in their desire to just get rid of them, if they can't just get rid of the entirety of the Department of Education as a whole. But in typical fashion, the administration has never seen a law they couldn't find a way to either outright ignore or at least get around. Their plan seeming to be to cede the responsibilities of these offices to other government agencies and just run them under contract with the Department of Education. Now, that doesn't seem to me to actually be following the letter of the law, but since when have they ever cared about what the law actually says? When you really get down to it, it's very clear the administration really just doesn't value education at all. As a result, don't really see what the point of a Department of Education even is. Secretary of Education McMahon was quoted as saying, in response to the recently ended government shutdown, quote, "Students kept going to class. Teachers continued to get paid. There were no disruptions in sports sessions or bus routes. The shutdown proved an argument that conservatives have been making for 45 years. The U.S. Department of Education is mostly a pass-through for funds that are best managed by the states." This statement highlighting not only their disdain for education, but also their disdain for the federal government in general. They love to make everything a matter for the states to decide, because they know that if federal law says they can't do something, the state laws rarely have that same stopping power. But obviously in this case, it's not simply about trying to give states more power and removing power from the federal government, taking away or at least loosening the safeguards that the American people have on receiving a quality and fair education. It's a danger to them, because an uneducated or at least undereducated populace is an easily manipulated one, and that's how bad actors, such as the ones within our current administration, rise to power in the first place. A lack of education is what keeps people stuck in a cycle of poverty that lasts generations. It's what helps maintain a high level of crime. High crime being something conservatives claim to be vehemently against, but also seemingly have no desire to tackle the factors that go into causing crime. If all Americans had a strong, robust, educational foundation, many could claw their way out of that cycle of poverty, thus eliminating or at least mitigating one of the main motivators for many to start a life of crime in the first place. Conservatives love to claim to be tough on crime, but in their mind that entails highly armed police officers roving the streets, arresting anyone they can, and incarcerating as many as they can possibly fit into private prisons, when truly being tough on crime would be addressing the factors, both economic and educational, that lead to crime. Many turn to crime because they feel desperate and there's no other way, and conservatives love to exploit the desperate for their own ends. One of the main attractors to the armed forces is the promise of education. Using education as the motivator to get people to go fight in armed combat for the country seems insidious to me, especially because conservatives have shown their disregard for veterans once they come back from the theater of war, leaving many who come back in a state where they cannot utilize the promises of good education that they were given when they started in the first place. They dangle the carrot of education in front of many who they know will never be able to bite it, never knowing that they're being exploited for a system that doesn't care about them and who will never properly compensate them for what they went through. And of course, in a more broad sense, we get back to the old adage of those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. But if you never learned the history to begin with, that becomes almost an inevitability. If you're never taught about the Gilded Age or read The Great Gatsby, you don't realize just how bad things get when all the wealth is at the top by a very small group of very rich individuals, and you're fine letting it happen again. If you're not taught the history of revolution and the necessities of them against exploitative and authoritarian regimes who never consider rising up against the one you're currently living within. It's long been said, and correctly so, that knowledge is power. So to take education away is to knowingly strip the people of their own power. And that's by design. They know what they're doing. It's not an accident by any means. An educated populace is a strong populace, and that is the anathema to those who seek to exploit them and to use them for their own enrichment. The fight for equal education for all people has been a hard-fought one, and to do what they're doing is to spit in the face of that struggle and that fight. The irony being that while Americans have long lamented how other countries have outpaced us in stuff like math and science and engineering, other nations value education and have enshrined it as a core value of who they are, while America has done nothing of the sort. It's kind of like wanting to win a race, but never wanting to do any of the training, and then wondering why everyone else is running faster than you. More than half of American adults read below a 6th grade level, and 43 million Americans are functionally illiterate. And I can only imagine those statistics will increase exponentially if these sorts of policies continue. In most of the rest of the developed world, those sorts of numbers would cause them great shame. And they would actually overhaul the educational system to make sure that those numbers go down. But not here, it would seem. People here want to be proud to be American, but then they want to undercut the things that are worth being proud of. Education, good education, should be something that is at the absolute heart of our country, something that is paramount to all Americans. If conservatives truly wanted to make America great again, they would be putting a greater focus on education. A great nation is an educated nation, and one that depends on an ignorant populace to keep those at the top rich and in power cannot call itself great. What this administration is doing to the Department of Education is a national shame. And they should be ashamed. And in any sane world, they would be ashamed. They wouldn't even try this stuff. But sadly, that's not the world we live in. Over and over, they want to hurt those who need the most protection. And this is just one more example of it. Seemingly everything they do makes us a worse nation and only widens the gap between us and the rest of the world. It's true, we used to be a nation of great minds who did great things. American ingenuity and a little German science was what managed to get us to the moon, amongst numerous scientific discoveries and achievements. But we can never hope to keep doing newer, better achievements if we have a population who are denied the opportunities to learn and rise to that level. Education Secretary McMahon claimed that if the buses ran on time and nobody missed their sports games, the Department of Education clearly wasn't necessary. To me, very clearly and deliberately misses the point. Education in this nation is important. It is vital, and valuing education and the necessity for it is equally important. Linda McMahon isn't the Secretary of Education. She's the Secretary of the lack of education. The Department of Education is about ensuring access to proper education to all and coordinating it all in one place on a large scale. If Secretary McMahon truly cannot see the value of the Department of Education, maybe she's the one that needs to educate herself. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time, when I cut you off, another slice of news.